guys, so today we're talking about the Banlist. I know it's a deck profile in front of us, but the reason why I have this deck profile in front of us is because I'm going to break this down into 3 different parts. So the first part is going to be like archetype specific cards that I feel like need to get hit. And I felt like the best way to talk about the archetypes was just to look at decks from each of the archetypes. So I have like 5 different decks that I feel like are the best 5 decks in the format. If I don't talk about your favorite deck or the deck you think is really, really good, I'm sorry. It's just from what I've noticed from the format. And the second part, I will say, I'm going to talk about non-archetype specific cards that I feel like need to get hit. Multiple different things there. And then the third part, I'm actually going to go to the ban list itself, and we're going to talk about the cards that need to come off the ban list. So that's always really fun. So make sure you guys click that like, comment, subscribe. Doing this in like a 3 different part instead of just like one long 30-minute video. It'll be 3 long 30-minute videos. No, hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter. Because out the gate, let's take a look at Kashtira. When we look at Kashtira, you got to ask, what does Kashtira do really well? So it summons for free, right? That's the first thing. But number 2, it takes away your zones. The monster zones, spell and trap zones, etc. Number 3, the macrocosmos, right? That's no fun. Number 4, it takes cards out of your deck, right? Banishes them face down, right? And so you don't really want... I don't think it needs either to get the tier element treatment, where we just completely butcher the deck. So then we ask, what parts of Kashtira could we hit without completely killing it, keeping it the same, but maybe just having it to be designed a little differently, right? So the first thing that comes to mind for me is like Pressured Planet. Pressured Planet being able to add a Kashtira monster, Pressured Planet being able to pop a card on the field is really, really good, right? And so if you limit Pressured Planet, that makes the deck that much less consistent, right? But the thing is, other than Pressured Planet, if you limit any of the Kashtira spells and traps, but you don't touch Unicorn, you don't really do a whole lot. Now, if you limit any of the Kashtira monsters, but you don't touch Fenrir, you don't really do a whole lot. So I think, logically, that would mean, let's hit Planet, let's hit Fenrir, right? Because if you hit Planet and you hit Fenrir, you're less likely to see the Unicorn. The deck probably becomes a little more Unicorn-centric. And the thing is, too, with Fenrir, I'll be curious to see, of these 5 random decks that I picked over like the last month, how many Fenrirs we stumble upon. And when you take a look at a card like Max C, for example, Max C, and some of you I know just started playing because of Master Duel, and Max C's legal there, or you started playing in 2020 formats, so you never played when Max C was legal in the TCG, and you might not know why it's banned. A big reason why it was banned was because every deck was running it. And Fenrir is kind of in that category. There's a couple of other cards we're going to talk about when we talk about generic cards that are in that category as well. But I think hitting Fenrir, hitting Pressured Planet is the move. I don't think you need to hit a Rise Heart. I know 2 Rise Heart's kind of annoying, right? So maybe you limit a Rise Heart, but it doesn't really change the deck too much. I mean, Shangri-La's fine. Mind Hacker's fine. I mean, Big Eye has been talked about, I know, before. I don't know if it ever got limited during Dragon Ruler format. But Big Eye is a pretty crazy card. But I think the big things with Kashtira are this. Yes, the Monster Zone spell and trap thing is annoying. Like the fact that they can stop you from activating spells and traps and different things like that. And using your Monster Zones. But realistically, they're taking away like 2 or 3 zones at most consistently, right? I know they can get to all 5. I know if they open well, they can do that. But if this deck gets hit, and it should get hit, I'm not saying it shouldn't get hit, but if this deck gets hit a little bit, I think that'll be less likely that they take away like 5 of your zones, right? And if that's the case, you don't really need a lot of zones because they can't take the extra monster zone, and you don't really need like a full set of monster zones to combo off. Like the Super Heavy Samurai deck is a 1-card combo, and there's a lot of 1-card combo decks. You could argue this is a 1-card combo deck, right? So just me personally, I think you limit Fenrir, you limit Pressured Planet, maybe limit a Rise Heart, and that's all you really need to do. Like Kashtira, Scareclaw's a decent card, Kashtira Ogre's okay. Unicorn, Tier Elements Kashtira. Like, you could still play this deck. And I think that's the thing. Like, I mentioned this before the last ban list. Konami, at least in the TCG, seems to have a tendency to have a really small ban list and then a really big one. And then really small, really big. And the last one was pretty big. I think we had like 8 or 9 limited cards and like 4 or 5 different banned cards. It was a pretty big ban list. So I would assume that this next one's not going to be as big. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really think we need that big of a ban list, right? But the next deck we're going to talk about is going to be just sort of like Sprite Runic type archetype, where like there's a few things we could talk about here. Runic Tip is obvious, right? But when I look at Runic, okay, hear me out. I don't think it needs to get hit that hard. Like, Runic is decent, but without Mystic Mine, in and of itself, it's not that great of a deck. Now, I know Runic is on here twice, and we're not even looking at the Fur Hire version. I think the Fur Hire version of Runic is just the worst Runic version. Maybe Pure Runic is a little bit worse. If you're going to hit something, hit Mayhem. Mayhem's the best Fur Hire card, but I don't think it needs to get hit. But when I look at this deck in particular, I see a card like Sprite Blue, even Sprite Starter. Those could get hit. And obviously Runic Tip, Runic Fountain, you know, these are your best cards, right? You know, you hit Runic Fountain, you fundamentally change the deck. I don't know if they're going to hit Runic Fountain, but, you know, hitting Sky Striker Multi-Roll fundamentally changed that deck, right? So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could change Fountain, but I think Runic Tip makes the most sense, right? Just limiting Runic Tip, making it a little bit worse, but I wouldn't be mad if we didn't see any Runic cards at all. That kind of thing. I think the main reason I clicked on this was because of Sprite. I think that Sprite is a very powerful archetype. I think that this doesn't really do Sprite Runic justice. This is really Evil Twin Sprite. I just clicked on a Sprite Runic archetype. So that's why this is the list we have. I think Totally Awesome is an interesting card. But overall, Sprite is going to be good. Even if you hit, like, unless you just completely destroy it. You know, you hit Sprite Elf and it didn't really go anywhere because it is a really, like, there are a lot of level 2, like the Nimble Anglers and the Frog package. And Gishki archetype just came out. Tri-Brigade Sprite's another thing, right? And Sprite in and of itself, if you just run Sprite Runic, right, that's all you really need to do. So I think that it would take a lot to completely neuter Sprite, and I don't think Sprite is that oppressive to completely hit it, but I think Sprite Blue feels like it makes a lot of sense. Just the ability to add any Sprite monster, it makes the deck substantially more consistent, it makes it a better engine. But a lot of times we see Konami, like, this is kind of, like, Sprite kind of reminds me of Tri-Brigade, like, and they don't usually touch archetypes like that. Sprite is a very fluid archetype that can support a lot of different archetypes. So I could see Sprite not getting hit. But if Sprite, I think Sprite Runic should get hit, though. I think the deck has been consistently really good. I guess you could argue like Destruction or Flashing Fire, but I think realistically Runic Tip is the one that they should hit. I'm all for, you know, limiting consistency cards, making the deck less consistent, because a lot of decks are really powerful. Ancient Gears are powerful. Fluffles are powerful. But it's the consistency that really makes the difference there. The next deck we're going to talk about is Math Mech. I don't know if anything needs to get hit on Math Mech. I just know it's a really good archetype. There is probably like one card, or a couple of cards actually that I think of. First one is Parallel Exceed. This card is just kind of everywhere, and it feels like we're slowly getting to a spot where this card should get hit soon, right? If you guys haven't taken a look, take a look at my bug deck profile that I have. I'm running Parallel Exceed in it because it's the fact that it's just this free rank 4, and the fact that the rank 4 is so powerful. But on top of that, it's a free, like in that deck, it was a free Appaloosa. It's almost a free Appaloosa, right? Like, there was so much you can do with Parallel Exceed as a card. And I've been on the fence about it a lot. because it can be a bit bricky if you draw it in multiples, and you do need to do something with it. And I think because of that, like, you can't, like, Parallel Exceed by itself isn't good, like, at all. But Parallel Exceed with other cards is insane, right? So, like, if, you do Math Mech things, go into Lingaribo, someone out Parallel Exceed, like, you're doing insane combos, right? But you kind of need that setup to do that. So, but I could see Parallel Exceed getting hit, but I think the biggest one is Access Code Talker. And Access Code Talker feels like a card that always gets brought up during the Banlist discussion times. And my thing is, with Access Code Talker, is like, it's like Super Poly. Like, make it able to be responded to. It can be super big, combined with Update Jammer. That's why we're talking about it here. Not just like generic, because Access Code Talker is generic. It's super generic, but it's really good in Cybers because it turns into this 4,300 attack monster that can pop 5 cards without being responded to and then attack directly twice. Feels pretty powerful, right? So I think Access Code Talker, limiting it doesn't do anything. I don't think so. I think you need to ban it or just leave it alone. And maybe leaving it alone is the move. Just to keep, give Link decks, something to build into. But Borreload Dragon, Borrelsword Dragon, they still exist. They're still fine. So, I don't know. I just think Access Code Talker is probably the one, if I had to pick from the Math Mech deck that could get hit. But maybe Math Mech doesn't need to get hit at all. Right? When we look at Branded Despia, this is another one that feels like, I don't know what really needs to get hit. When I look at the extra deck, Guardian Chimera is interesting. The drawing and destroying feels really good. Dragoon has been talked about a lot. I don't think Dragoon's that big of an issue, though. They're not going to hit, the new cards, obviously. Like, yes, there is a combo. Is it in here? I don't think it's in here. It is in here. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, right? Like, that card, when you think of that card, like, that card probably does need to get banned. Just because saying, like, you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not really something that I think is good for the game. Other than that, though, this deck feels really solid but fair. Maybe Branded Fusion being semi-limited, right? I don't usually talk about cards being semi-limited, but being semi-limited could be a thing. But the thing is we're always going to have, and it was invoked for the longest time, we're always going to have a fusion-based archetype that's really, really good. Because there's so much support for it, like Fusion Deployment, Edge and, Chain and Fight for Patchwork. Now Branded Fusion. Red Eyes Dark Dragoon is kind of generic. Super Poly at 3. Or, it's at 2 in this list, but at 3, right? And I honestly wouldn't be upset about Super Poly going back on the ban list, at least to 1. Once again, I just don't love that neither player can activate cards or effects in response. Honestly, if you get rid of that second sentence, you're fine. So, I don't think this deck is that fantastic. And like I said earlier, I don't know if we really need a ban list like that. Like, I think Cyberstorm Access is going to shake up the meta a good amount. And I think that we're in a cool spot in the format. I don't really think we need a ban list like that. But the final card I really want to talk about is from Naturia. We already talked about Runic. I don't think Naturia's Blessing is that big of an issue, but I do think it's probably the best new Naturia card. But I think the card that needs to get hit from this archetype is Naturia Beast. Naturia Beast is a card, whenever it's been able to be made, it's insane. And what bothers me is that cards like this, like Artifact Scythe, Christian Halka Fibrax, Predaplant Verite, and Anaconda, like cards like this consistently have issues just destroying the meta. And this is another card too, where if you just add a hard once per turn, like you can only activate this effect once per turn, you're fine. Like you all of a sudden it's completely fine. But the fact that it just says no to spells and like spell cards, it's just simply an Imperial Order is insane. But let me know what you guys think. I wanted to make this a little bit of a shorter video, so 15 minutes is gonna have to do. What cards from like meta specific archetypes do you guys think we should be getting hit? Let me know in those comments down below. Make sure you guys click that like button, show support for the channel, subscribe, because we will be talking about cards that need to get hit that are just kind of generic, and taking cards off the ban list. That'll be coming up very shortly, so make sure you guys subscribe for that. Most importantly of all, have a good day.